and build shared understanding that sets everyone up for success. Let's become the systems thinkers that our teams and quite honestly the world are so desperately craving. Let's level up our practice and redefine what it means to be a UX designer. Let's jump into it. Hello there. What's up, UXers? All right, Sophia here, and I am here to tell you a story about how I was recently set straight and brought down to the real world, and then I have some thoughts on that. Okay, so let's take it back a step before I get into the story. Y'all know that I am all about asking those showstopper $1,000,000 questions, asking the questions that prevent that later feeling of like, why did nobody tell me this? And I am being bit in the ass by something that, like, how would have I known to ask that question? Or why didn't somebody tell me this? So we want to prevent that, right? We want to prevent the shifting of requirements, the shifting of scope later on that potentially could have been prevented by asking some questions earlier on. And I want to give you that feeling of asking those questions that just everybody's just kind of stops in the room and is like, oh, that's a really good question. Like, why did nobody else think about that? I'm so glad you asked that. Wow, like that is really setting us straight because we were just operating on this assumption. So that feels really, really good when you can do that, when you can ask the questions that really do kind of like just people are picking their jaws up off the ground and you are adding so much value by moving the conversation in areas where we are squashing the assumptions, okay? Or we're recognizing the assumptions, not squashing them. We're recognizing them and being like, okay, let's go. Do we need to do A? Do we need to do B? Do we need to do more research? And one of those big questions, so lots of those questions come up when we are practicing object-oriented UX and in the OOUX process. And one of those big questions that we get into is why? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And the flip side is the why not? Like, why should we not do this? And we don't ask why, like the curious kid who's like, you know, like why do cats have whiskers or something? Like questions that are interesting, but irrelevant to the problem at hand of like, for example, getting out the door before 8 a.m. So imagine actually that same kid asking, why is it so important that we leave before 8 a.m. when our flight is not until 10 a.m.? It's like, okay, actually it's kind of relevant. And now I can explain to you about the joys of TSA and why it takes an hour and a half to get to your flight. And so we also don't ask why not in this like flippant way, like your daredevil cousin asking like, hey, do you want to go skydiving? And they're like, why not? No, like we seriously ask, why not? Like, what is a good reason to not do this thing? All right, so we want to ask why, and we want to ask why not, like true professionals, right? This is part of the value that we bring is asking questions, and why is like the mother of all questions. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about why asking why is such an important skill for UX designers, like why is something you should really be doing, and also how to do this like a pro. So we're going to be getting deep into this question why, but if you want to learn more about asking questions overall within OOUX and the OORCA process and get an overview of what OORCA even is, make sure to go to OOUX.com/levelup. I've got a free training for you. It's like 2 hours and it gives you all the need to knows. That's OOUX.com/levelup and it's completely free. This story that I wanted to tell you is about, I was in my advanced training course. I was teaching my advanced training course. So the advanced training runs parallel to the certification. So we have a certification, we have an advanced certification. And those that are getting their advanced certification are mentoring those that are getting their certification. So, and if you're thinking about doing that, we start on September 8th of this year, 2025. So be watching your inbox, make sure to get on the wait list, OOUX.com/certification. And if you're already certified, watch your inbox. You'll be getting an invite soon to join the advanced training. If you qualify, there is a test. Okay. Anyway, so I am in this advanced training, giving a training on whying your CTAs. And I think in this particular conversation, so a lot of it was where like the training consists of how to mentor and like all the things to watch out for, like common mistakes that people make. And then we go on to learn some like super advanced power moves. So what I was talking about is how when the mentors, when you're looking at your mentees' whys, when they're talking about whying their calls to action on objects. So one of the biggest mistakes that we need to look at as mentors when people are going through the certification is when our mentees are whying their CTAs. They basically have to write why statements for all the calls to action, all the objects. And what we often get in those why statements is like very surface level answers to the why. So we are often coaching them to like, okay, think a little bit deeper about this. Like what's actually motivating them? What is motivating the user to do this thing? So for example, let's give an example. So let's say I'm making a system for amateur arborists to help them track hemlock trees that need treating for the woolly adelgid. The woolly adelgid is an invasive species killing all our hemlocks. It's horrible. And somebody needs to make an app for amateur arborists to basically go and treat these hemlocks so they don't go extinct. All right. Okay. So let's say that's the application. And we might decide that an arborist can mark hemlock as healthy. All right. And so a first pass at a why statement might be something like, so all the arborists can see that this hemlock is healthy. Very surface level. Like, why do they want to like something? So that they can mark the thing as liked. Like we get sometimes people putting their why statements like this, like really phoning it in, but thinking that that's actually they're not trying to phone it in, but thinking that that is an adequate answer to why. And so as mentors, we got to go and be like, no, let's why that why. Like, why is it important that all arborists can see the hemlocks as healthy? Okay, is it so that we can track progress of tree health in the app to garner more donations or something like that? Is it because arborists get points or badges for updating a tree status? Is it to increase the community in the application? Like you treated the hemlock, like let's say like you listening, treated some hemlock XYZ on a hike, and then I come in and I see that this hemlock is healthy and I like find it in the GPS and I'm like, this hemlock is now healthy. Like maybe you get notified to know that your treatment worked and you see like, oh, Sophia let you know that this hemlock is now healthy. Like that could be cool too. So maybe it's something about the community. So many reasons why, okay? So I'm going on and on about this. And the advancees kind of set me straight. And they're like, often we're just told by product people or business people or stakeholders that the tree needs to be marked as healthy. Like asking why is actually seen to slow everything down. Like often we're not deciding what those things are, what those calls to action are. It just comes down the pipeline and the answer to the question, why does this need to happen? Why does somebody need to do this thing to this object is often because I said so. Like maybe unspokenly, I hope people aren't actually saying because I said so, but like that's the vibe, right? Like, so I get that often we feel like our hands are tied or we're not getting to make those decisions on why. So like if we're constantly just being sort of a thorn in everybody's side, being like, well, why this and why that and why that? And let's make sure we have a good reason for that. I can see that as coming off as like not very diplomatic. Like that's not the way we want to go about asking why, but I still think that we need to do it. And we can do it in a way that doesn't seem annoying or like the kid that's asking why cats have whiskers when we're trying to go and catch a flight. So here are the two main reasons that I think it's so important that we are asking why. There's so many more reasons. There's so many whys to asking why. How many times am I going to say why? It's going to stop sounding like why. Okay, the first one is this just does wonderful things for your brain, all right? So asking why deeply and coming up with creative hypotheses, like I just did, like just off the cuff, thinking about the arborist and why they would mark a tree as healthy, is a wonderful exercise for your creative system thinking brain. Okay, so systems thinkers, they ask why all the time. They are pros at it. And the more of us designers become systems thinkers, the more humanity and civilization basically has a chance of surviving the next 100 years, right? Okay, so do this small stuff first. Practice. Notice when you are doing something without questioning it. Okay, is there a reason to do this or a reason not to do this? So the more you practice questioning and coming up with potential whys to test or research more, and really like keeping an open mind that like it could be something completely different than what you've hypothesized, you are actually changing your brain. You're growing your brain to become a more critical thinker and more human actually, which is what the world needs in the world of artificial intelligence doing more and more for us, okay? We really need to lean into our own curiosity and imagination and our humanness, okay? So because this trains the brain in systems thinking, and systems thinking is, I truly believe, what the world needs. Listen to the last episode, I talk all about this. It's such an important skill to be honing, and it takes practice. It really does. And often a lot of us might have been living in a way where like maybe early on we were told not to ask why, right? So like this could go into some childhood wounds, y'all. All right. Like look back, like were you told that you're asking too many questions from a very young age? It could feel actually really, really scary. So start small, do it in ways that you feel is safe. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But like, this is so, so important to also just notice that you're not asking why in the beginning, right? Instead of just it's that awareness piece. Like awareness is the first step of being like, wow, I am just doing this thing and I didn't even ask why this is important. I don't really understand why. And maybe if I did, I would design it differently. And we're going to get to that in a moment too. Okay. So if that is a bit too grand and theoretical, okay, how about this? It saves a shit ton of money, all right, asking why. So the OOUX process, and to recap what that stands for my newbies here, welcome. The OOUX process is objects, relationships, calls to action, and attributes. Okay, so this is the process that we go through from a system design perspective to really figure out what is the OOUX of our system, because your system has an OOUX. It has objects, it's got relationships, it's got CTAs, and it's got attributes, and you want to be really clear on what those things are. So the OOUX process, and specifically the prioritization round, really helps you eliminate like designing and developing and maintaining things you don't actually want or need, or your users don't actually want and need, that are not necessarily good for the business. So when we can ask why super strategically and be the ones to start those difficult conversations, we can also be the ones to help focus the team effort and save so much time. Okay, so I'm gonna actually read some stories from some OOUXers who have experienced this, okay? So that you're not just hearing it from me. So Matthew Smith says, hi, Matthew Smith, if you're listening. Hello. Principal product strategist. He says, this is, I quote, the OOUX process has helped me work with clients, and this is a little bit long, okay? So just bear with me, okay? So Matthew says, the OOUX process has helped me work with clients to focus on the right outcomes, saving budget hours and production time, building features that users don't want. I use OOUX in my design and planning engagements, short initiatives focused on defining and scoping or validating a client's concept. One story in particular really stands out. We had agreed to work on a potential IoT product for a client who wanted to test the experience at a conference in 2 months. Applying a discovery and prioritization round to the information we had let us find a realistic version we were able to design and prototype in time for the conference testing. There were 3 primary outcomes. We were ready to start producing work in about 2 weeks for something that would have usually taken the agency closer to 6 weeks. That was huge, as this client had a history of spending over a year creating products to just have them fail to meet expectations. We saved the client from a multi-million-dollar investment on a product launch that would have been a dud, enabling them to course correct. We likely saved the client hundreds of thousands of project hours in the long run. The original idea had some valuable points, but end users largely wanted a different set of features. Okay, end quote. So that is all because going through this process helped Matthew and his team strategically ask why. Why are we doing this? And why are we doing that? We are grilling our O's, our R's, our C's, and our A's, and even individual parts of those to ask why, in a very strategic, pointed way. Okay, so Camille Van Buren, digital experience design team leader at IKEA, he's been on the podcast, says, before doing any design, the product owner, the engineers, and I use my OOUX prototype to decide together the scope of the project. This saves us so much time. Yes. And Evelina Novakovska, director of UX at the American Reading Company, says OOUX will give you the mental agility toward asking the right questions at the right time so you can solve the problem the fastest way possible. Okay, cool. So asking why is this power skill for world-changing systems thinking designers, and it will save your company time and money. Okay, win-win. All right, cool. So hopefully you're pretty convinced now. Like, yes, I need to be zhuzhing up my why asking skills. Okay, so here is my, how many steps? My 4 steps to asking why strategically and diplomatically. Step 1. Do it quietly. So practice actually. So again, notice when you're not asking why, and then start the asking, okay? You can actually do this in your life. So why am I creating this podcast? Am I doing it because I actually have something to say or because I feel pressure to create on a schedule? Okay. If you've been listening, you know that the latter is not true. But I also just did this rebrand on the UX Level Up, right? So like I wanted to get another episode out, all right? And I felt this like really fit in to this whole idea of leveling up. This is like one of the like main ways we can level up is ask better questions, okay? So I do have my reasons. All right. So you can do this for your own life. Like, are you doing a thing because you're just running the program and you're not necessarily asking, why am I actually doing this? What are my intentions here? What are my intentions? That is a great way to kind of ask why. So, and then for UX decisions, what you want to do is you want to ask why and create deep hypotheses about user motivations, business reasons, why this is a good idea to include and why we might actually want to exclude it, all right? What could go wrong? Are there any potential negative repercussions? Okay, so this first step is about noticing that you're not asking why, right? That you're just doing a thing, because that's how it'll start in the beginning, is if you haven't been asking why, you will be in the middle of the thing and you'll be like, oh. And then the more awareness, like anything, when you start growing awareness on it, you start realizing it before you start doing it, right? But in the beginning, or it might even be after, you might do the thing and be like, wait a second, I didn't even ask why. I just did that thing. Okay, depending on where you are in your why asking journey, okay? It might take a while to start developing this awareness and just like have a lot of grace with yourself, that like you'll start just noticing and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing things and I'm totally not asking why. Okay. So, or you might be like, no, I do ask why all the time. Great. Okay. So you could be in different places with this, but what you want to do is you want to start doing it quietly, ask for yourself, and create hypotheses about the whys. Like, is it because of this? Is it because of this? Is it because of this? All right, second, number 2, after you've come up with some of those scenarios, now what I want you to do is I want you to sketch out how the design might change based on those answers. And by sketch out, like maybe you're sketching screens, maybe you're actually moving your OOUX sticky notes around, okay? So basically model or sketch, okay, if the answer is A, what would my design decision be? If my answer is B, then what would my design decision be, okay? And if the answer doesn't change, right? If your question is more like, why do cats have whiskers? That's totally not going to change the fact that we need to leave by 8 a.m. or something like that. So that may be one of those questions. It's like interesting, but actually doesn't really matter. Okay, cool. Like that's amazing to find that out. Like I had a why. I went down a curiosity rabbit hole. I thought about some hypothesis and then I realized like this actually doesn't change my design decision. Okay. So you just practice asking why and realizing that why was irrelevant, which is a win. That is actually the skill, especially for curious, quote unquote, overthinkers. Okay. To channel all that curiosity into deep thinking or highly relevant questions. Okay. And this does take practice. Okay. So you might need to hone this. And for a while, you might be doing it on your own, being like, oh, you might ask, 3 to 4 whys that actually are completely irrelevant to the problem at hand before you hit on a why that's like, oh, actually, this is a really good why, because based on the answer, like I would design this thing completely differently based on the answer to the why. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I can't hear you answering, but hopefully you're nodding your head right now. Okay. Again, this takes practice. The more you do it, the more you will intuitively know if asking why really matters here. Like I've gotten really good at this. Like when I'm in a workshop, I can just ask why and I'm like pretty sure I know where to pick my battles, right? That this is a really good time to ask why versus like, this is just my curiosity, which I'm a very, very curious person. And I would ask why about like every single freaking thing, but we don't have time for that, right? Okay. So are you just curious or does this actually affect how you're going to solve the problem? All right. So for example, if we find out that like our amateur arborists are highly motivated by the social aspect and connecting with others and feeling like they're part of something bigger, that most are introverts and they love spending time alone in the forest, but the system is a way for them to feel like they are part of a movement or something like that. All right. That will totally change my design recommendations as opposed to like, no, they don't really care, but we want to encourage them to like update the tree status because as an app, then we can show this roll up data, right? It's not just about treating the trees. We want to see that the trees that we've treated are actually getting better, right? And then we can get more donations. Okay, again, that's going to change how I design this. All right, so cool. All right, so to recap, 1, notice and start asking. Okay, create this hypothesis. That's like actually 3 steps, but let's just call it 1. Okay, 2, sketch out how those different hypotheses is going to actually change your design. Okay, and be really clear and honest with yourself about like, is it going to change the design or is it not going to change the design? And if it doesn't change the design, let it go. Okay, 3rd, so assuming that you have different design decisions based on the why, okay? Amazing. Now see if you can track down the answers on your own. So start by being resourceful, all right? Especially if you're in an environment where asking questions isn't cool, okay? So if the answer is readily available, like you actually kind of are wasting others' time by asking. Okay. So do what you can, ask friends and family what they think, go to arborist, online forums or something, see if it's in any documentation or any, throw the user, can you chat with the user transcripts, right? And see if you can use some AI to mine the data that you have and figure out if you can get an answer to this question. All right. So why would arborists want to mark a tree as healthy? Okay. What would motivate them to do this? And do your research. And does your research open up more questions? Is it truly an open question? Or is the answer like right there below the surface and you can just go ahead and bake it into your design decision and then document that research so then later you can defend your design decision. You're like, oh, this is why I decided this way because I found out that there is this deep social aspect of it and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Hopefully my example isn't too silly. Hopefully you're following me, you're picking up what I'm putting down. So at this point, if you still need to ask, you're like, this is an open question. I've done my research. And when I'm talking about do your research, it depends on how long you have. This might even be just 15 minutes of digging to be okay, there's not a readily available answer. Okay. So now number 4, you've asked why, you've sketched out how different whys will lead you to different design decisions, and you've done a bit of sleuthing to get more context and make sure those obvious answers are not just right there for the taking. Okay. So now it's time to actually ask. So here is how to do it, okay? So first, frame it up, all right? So my husband does this thing when we eat on an airplane. And when we eat on an airplane, often we'll get Subway at the airport, if there's not better food, and we always get the tuna salad at the Subway, at Subway. And when we get on the flight, he will sit down and he'll look at the person next to him and be not me, but the stranger next to him and be like, hey, I apologize in advance. I'm about to eat a really stinky sandwich. And then they're always like, oh, no, it's fine. Don't even worry about it. It's just saying that you're doing the thing, right? Just stating it. So we can use this, right? So especially depending on the type of person you're working with, someone who is easily triggered by questions. So the vibe you want to bring this question forward with is can you humor me here? I know this might feel like a waste of time, but I have a question on tree status. Do you have a few? So go ahead and say, I know that this feels like it might be taking a couple steps back, or can you humor me? Is a really nice way to let them know that they are doing you a favor. I don't think that's manipulation. I think that's just framing it up to be this. It almost takes the wind out of their sails, right? So if you go ahead and admit, right, even though you have every right to be asking a question, but if you go ahead and admit this might feel like a waste of time, then likely what they'll do is oh no, don't even worry about it. Of course I want to answer your questions. Okay. So just name it right off the bat. Okay. And then say, do you have a few? Okay, cool. I would love some more insight into why arborists are updating the status and updating the status to healthy. Okay. I realize the obvious reasons here, and you might list off some of the low hanging fruit, obvious reasons, but I wanted to go deeper into their motivations. And here's why. So if I designed it, if X is true, then I would design it like this. And you could actually show if X is true, this is how I would design it. But if Y is true, I would design it like this. And I did a little digging into stakeholder interviews and some online forums, and I came up with XYZ. This is what I found out. And then what you say is, what are you asking for to get the answer? Are you asking to talk to a few users? Are you asking for, access to a specific stakeholder and booking a meeting? Do you want to run a small workshop or something? What is the actual solution to getting that answer? So it's do you know the answer to this? And if you don't know the answer to this, then here's what I would suggest to get the answer. Okay. That shows so much proactiveness. That shows so much proactiveness. Okay. So to recap there on how you want to do it, you want to name the situation. I understand that this might be a little annoying. Okay. And then they'll tell you that it's not. All right. Human nature there. All right. And then be really clear on what your question is, and show how you might design it differently if X or if Y, and then also show any of the research that you did. Okay. So, and then finally, what do you actually want? All right. What is the request? What is the plan? How, if they don't know the answer for sure, they agree that this is we don't want to operate based on this assumption, then what's the plan? So they don't have to think of the plan. They don't have to do that, right? You're just asking, do I have permission to do this? And then also question, do you need permission, right? If you already know how you can get that answer, do you need to ask this person to get permission? Can you just go and get the answer? Right. Okay. So assuming that you do need to like get the permission to take the time and take the resources to get the answer. So if you are brushed off, all right, if they're like, that's a dumb question, and why are you even asking that question? Or they're like, okay, you're brushed off, all right? So then what you can do is you can ask, what assumption should I design under then? So what you're doing is you're actually naming it as an assumption, right? So it's like, okay, they didn't answer the question, right? They could just answer the question for you, great. But if they're like, don't even worry about this, you're overthinking it, that might be what they say, you're overthinking it, all right? Then say, okay, so should I design under this? Because I have these two different designs here sketched out for you. Like, should I design under this assumption or this assumption? And I assume that it's pretty low risk to assume this. That's what you can say. Like, make them acknowledge that you are designing underneath an assumption. Make them say, I want you to design under this assumption. And also make them acknowledge that this is very low risk. That doesn't really matter, right? Like, okay, I'm going to design under this assumption. And then you can even ask, like, or you can say, so this is likely like a really low risk thing. Sorry, I was so sorry that I was asking too many questions, right? And make them say it. Make them say it's low risk, okay? Let me know how that goes, all right? Okay, and a few final notes for you. So often if you're in a meeting and something comes up, like you can just ask, right? Especially after honing the spidey sense for your relevant whys, because often you don't have time to like go through this whole process. Like I totally get that. Do what you can with the bandwidth, all right? Even if it's literally like you're under the desk doing a little bit of quick research, right, before you ask it. If you need that to feel more comfortable, I often do not go through all of this unless it's like a bigger one. But if I'm in a workshop and I'm running a workshop, I'm asking why, like all the time. But I'm usually pretty quick on my toes to be like, I can think through, because I have a lot of practice with this, of this is how I would design it if it was X, and this is how I would design it if it's Y. And I can like hone in on that and be like, oh, this is something that we are basing, there's an assumption here, and based on the outcome of this assumption, of this question, the design would change. Okay. All right. Another note for you. Real talk, hot takes, real talk. The people that brush off whys and the why should we not questions are not the people you want to impress long-term in your career. Okay. Right? This whole like, get it done, ask questions later, ship the screens, doesn't even matter if they're shit, move fast, break things, blah, 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 blah. This mentality is going out of style, y'all. Okay, so sure, do not piss them off, work with them, but don't let them make you feel bad or wrong for asking super relevant questions that impact the design, okay? The people you want to impress, the real professionals in leadership looking to create amazing products and experiences that truly elevate humanity and solve real problems, like in big and small ways, like even mundane problems like helping people fill out insurance claims or helping people buy their dream house or helping people learn what colors they look best in, okay? Like whatever those things are, it doesn't have to be like, feeding the world or anything like that, but like the people that are wanting to solve real problems, okay? Big and small. Those are the people that will appreciate the showstopper questions that do slow everything down. They will recognize how it will create better products faster in the long run. Okay. The people that you want to, in short, the people that you want to impress will recognize and acknowledge a damn good question. Okay. So I would love to hear what you think about this. If you have questions for me, you can DM me on Instagram at SophiaVUX or head over to the OUX forum at forum.OUX.com. We can talk about it there. Okay, happy OUXing and happy asking whying your why. Thank you so much for listening to the UX Level Up podcast. If you want to connect with me, Sophia, please follow me on Instagram at SophiaVUX, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophia Prater. I'm pretty easy to find there. Our music was brought to you by Ruby Vel, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Thanks again for listening.